Good evening or afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another tropical update here by Age with Forecast. And as you can tell, we're gonna be doing updates on not Hurricane anymore, Tropical Storm Henri and Tropical Storm Grace. So obviously, these are no longer both hurricanes. Henri kind of had a decoupled, kind of low pressure, surface low, so it's kind of really weakened with wind as well. There does seem like this year is starting to become a little bit more of a factor as well. Grace has made landfall across Yucatan earlier this morning. So as well as really weakened actually dramatically down to 50 miles an hour. This thing is dramatically weakened over a small area of land. I mean, that's not like a small area of land, but like, I mean, considering its speed, you wouldn't think it would drop it so much. Um, I mean, it basically dropped like 30 miles an hour. That's a dramatic decrease here. But likely to become a hurricane once again in the Bay of Campeche, and we do have hurricane warnings for portions of Mexico. And so we do have their tropical storm Henri, 65 miles an hour, while Grace is at 50 miles an hour and 999 millibars. And starting to now move westward at 15 miles an hour. And then Henri, on the other hand, is 65 miles an hour and 997 millibars. So for once, Henri is stronger again. It's back and stronger than Grace, and it's now starting to move westward, still at 10 miles an hour. But soon it's going to start doing that northern turn. So let's go look at the Grace advisory first. We're gonna get into depth about the actual cone soon in the video. However, here's a look at the actual peak forecast. So inland right now at 50 miles an hour initially, but within 12 hours, it looks like it's going to start really getting its act together, strengthening 15 miles an hour within 12 hours from now, then another 15 miles an hour. So we're basically looking at strengthening 30 miles an hour within 24 hours. So this thing can maybe get very close to rapid intensification here. So we cannot rule out the possibility this thing could very well RI in the Bay of Campeche. Because obviously that's 30 miles an hour in 24 hours. It's basically 5 miles an hour off from it rapidly intensifying, and then get to the 85, but obviously you have to get 85 within 24 hours for the actually RI, but it does become 85 at 36 hours, and then it dramatically decreases in strength here. That goes down 35 miles an hour over the next 48 hours as it makes landfall across portion of southern Mexico. So tropical storm conditions will continue this afternoon and evening across the northern Yucatan Peninsula. So obviously we are still seeing some really widespread tropical storm winds across Yucatan at the moment, and hurricane conditions and dangerous storm surge are likely along a portion of the eastern mainland Mexico beginning late Friday. A hurricane warning is in effect from Puerto Veracruz northward to Cabo Rojo. So as well, looking at for some torrential rainfall, and it's going to definitely have some pretty conducive environment in the Gulf, in the Bay of Campeche, obviously southern Gulf of Mexico. Henri, as well, a pretty big threat, I'd say, for New England, because obviously they don't typically see something like this. Typically, they get the resemblance or the remnants. Sorry, the remnants, not resemblance, the remnant of systems or tropical depression or tropical storm basically Faye or Isaias, but this one's actually be a potential hurricane threat towards portions of obviously New England here. I mean, not really a hurricane landfall. However, we are looking at maybe a chance for possibly hurricane force gusts, possibly, because looking at 90 miles an hour for the next 60 hours or so. So looking at the peak that happened within less than 3 days from now, but gonna be 65 for a little bit of a while here, actually, according to the National Hurricane Center. It won't get back to a hurricane till most likely the next 36 hours or so. So definitely, it looks like it has kind of had a setback right at this point. The convection kind of decoupled a little bit, and the MLC and LLC are no longer stacked, at least I would have seen so far. But it's going to gradually get its act together as it goes later on here. So Henri is forecasted to be near the northeast coast of the U.S. on Sunday and Monday, and the risk of storm surge, wind, and rain impacts in portions of southern New England, basically kind of Massachusetts, kind of Cape Cod region specifically, and eastern Long Island are increasing. Watches will likely be required for portions of this area early Friday. So we may see tropical storm watches issued as early as tomorrow morning here. Swells from Henri will begin to reach much of the east coast of the U.S. by the end of the week here. So overall, looking at possibly for some impacts from Henri very soon across the Northeast and New England. Let's take a look here at Grace here, the latest recon that's actually going within the system at the moment here. So let's wait for that to load here. But there you can kind of see the recon is basically kind of going within the surface low area of Grace at the moment. So there's the actual low level circulation. It's basically kind of right off the coast of Mexico. So it looks like the LLC is about to be overwatered. I wouldn't say it's overwatered at the moment. I think it's basically right on the coast there. You can kind of see northeast quadrant seeing some pretty good overall flight level winds here of over 60 knots. And they kind of are going within the southern side of the system, which seems to be rather weaker. However, we're gonna get more, I guess, ideas as a new recon is actually on its way for Grace. You can kind of see a new recon within its way at the moment. Here's the information that we got from that last recon, seeing around 55 knots there, for flight level. Sorry, surface winds. Sorry, surface winds. 55 knots, so we could very well see maybe this thing is going to start getting its ass together, as the surface low could very well be slightly just off the coast or slightly just within the coast. It's kind of extremely hard since we kind of have a general idea where the actual LLC is, but not if it's actually exactly off the water or exactly inland. Flight level supported 60 knots there, so which is basically around 70-ish miles an hour, while surface winds here has just supported maybe around 65-ish miles an hour. And obviously, it's only 50 right now, so it's obviously not going to be really the most valid information. Then look at Henri recon. You can guys see there, it's really kind of decoupled a lot. Pressure is quite high, 998 and 1,000 millibars. And as well, GFS, I believe, is trying this kind of continue to weaken for like 12 hours until it actually gets act together later on. The actual information at 55 knots there for surface wind, so 65 miles an hour, which is why it kind of got decreased. And then 70 miles an hour, actually around 72, 73 miles an hour are supported there at flight level. So this thing's still a really high-end tropical storm. However, it does not look to strengthen much until it gets its act together and the MLC and LLC are stacked again. So here's a look here at the actual satellite imagery here on looking at here tropical storm Henri. Obviously is kind of pretty decoupled. You can kind of see, at least it was a lot more decoupled, kind of just two split areas there. That kind of convection is really separate like that because the LLC and MLC are kind of no longer within or no longer stacked here, which is why you're kind of seeing it. It kind of looks so ugly looking, at least based on my perspective. Still seeing that really good, strong counterclockwise flow overall. It's still a pretty good looking system. However, that's exactly why it is not a hurricane yet. And this is why it actually got downgraded to 65 miles an hour because of how it got decoupled. And no longer are the MLC and LLC stacked, which is obviously what they want to be stacked. Obviously, if you want to have it get towards a hurricane, actually have a pretty good strong core. So here's the actual latest 5 o'clock advisory forecast cone for Henri. And you can see, looking at possibly maybe a hurricane landfall for Massachusetts. However, it's going to be a really close call. Maybe 75 miles an hour or maybe 70 miles an hour for the landfall. Either way, it's going to be either high-end, very, very, very high-end tropical storm or a very, very low-end hurricane. So it's going to probably be like right kind of at the border of those titles. But pretty overall decent wind field still, but won't become a hurricane until early tomorrow. Or sorry, early Saturday morning here, maybe at 2 a.m. Maybe become a hurricane as early as tomorrow, very late night. It's really all depends on whether they can stack again. And that's going to kind of go due north because of the overall steering from the Bermuda High. And it's going to aim straight for a portion of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. You can kind of see that cone has really shifted eastward, so New York City is no longer in the cone. I never really kind of thought New York City would get hit. I've been really watching it this whole time for around Massachusetts/Rhode Island, but it looks like it's going to really be a big factor towards really Cape Cod specifically and portions of eastern Massachusetts, and as well a pretty overall threat for even portions of Maine here. And this is a significant threat because obviously this is very not too common where you see storms steer like this and stay at a pretty decent strength for a landfall here. This is obviously a very not the most common track here, and it's obviously may get to a peak of 90 miles an hour, which is a pretty high-end category 1 here, so it's pretty intimidating as it goes towards portions of New England, which is obviously especially a lot less likely to get a hurricane compared to the Mid-Atlantic. And even for the Mid-Atlantic, like Virginia or Delmarva or even New Jersey, it's still quite uncommon. But intensity guidance here for Henri, you can kind of see the majority want to have it kind of stay rather weaker at around 55 knots, and then get its act together within 36 hours and possibly become a mid-end hurricane or maybe even a little bit higher end. Big factor towards, though, overall strengthening trend for at least Grace is going to be the somewhat moderately deep oceanic content, maybe around 100-ish, maybe 150 meters of over over 80 degrees Celsius waters in the central Bay of Campeche, so that's when we can possibly expect to get back to 85 miles an hour. That deeper ocean heat content as well. Looking at Henri doesn't have the deepest ocean heat content. However, there are spots of over 75 meters. So that's definitely going to be something to keep a very close eye on. But the actual SSTs here are obviously really warm for the Bay of Campeche, even though ocean heat content is a little bit more minimal. So looking at around 30 degrees Celsius as well, pretty warm Gulf Stream. And since kind of, I guess, Henri went so far south, it's basically really a pretty big hotspot of really warm waters of over 29 degrees Celsius. However, the big thing is if it's going to really weaken before landfall of Massachusetts, kind of like what the H4 is showing here. They have it really dramatically dropping in strength, and millibar or dramatically increasing, I guess, dramatically increasing in pressure, but dramatically decreasing in strength as it gets towards Massachusetts. And actually, I'm going to show that really quickly here in the very last part of the video, because there are really cold waters, 19 degrees Celsius, maybe 20 degrees Celsius waters just off the coast here. However, there are still some waters kind of a few hundred miles off that are still supportive, maybe 25 degrees Celsius, 26 degrees Celsius, kind of past this line. I'm actually going to do that again with a little bit thinner of a line here, kind of past this line, is where the conditions really won't be conducive for further strengthening and actually be more of a trend for weakening here. So it's going to be pretty good, maybe 100 miles or more of really cold SSTs here. However, it could definitely become still a high-end tropical storm. But I'm not sure exactly still about the hurricane landfall for New England. It's going to be a very close call. However, still either way, it's going to be quite significant with some storm surge, rip currents, and as well, big threat, of course, of flooding. Let's now get a look here at Tropical Storm Grace, and as well, you can kind of see there is the area of low-level circulation. Basically, looks like it's just about to be off the coast here. It could very well maybe just be off the waters. Like I said, overall, we have a vicinity. It's basically right here somewhere, whether it's just off the coast or just inland. However, either way, whether it's not or it is, it's going to be over water within like an hour or so for sure. Definitely lost a lot of structure here. You can kind of see it's lost a lot of its eastern quadrant kind of convection initiation. However, you still see some actually convection bursting here towards the east of that lower circulation, as well as some pretty strong western quadrants there. Some pretty good banding here as well. So overall, it's not looking the best. It kind of looks very like a shrimp shape here. It's not looking the best at all. It's kind of really lopsided. Or kind of more one-sided, I guess you could say that, but it's definitely going to get to act together. Again, it's 50 miles an hour, so it's really dramatically weakened a lot here. But the wind feels still rather large, actually, bringing some tropical storm winds like over like 200 miles, or actually maybe 150 miles north of Yucatan. So still a rather very large wind field. It could very well be our largest wind field so far this year in the North Atlantic. Hurricane warnings, though, issued for portions there of eastern Mexico off the Bay of Campeche waters, with warnings going further northward because of that significantly large tropical storm wind fields, which obviously enlarge furthermore as it possibly gets very close to rapid intensification there, as well as still tropical storm warnings across much of Yucatan. So obviously it looks like it could become a hurricane once again by possibly mid tomorrow, and pose a threat there for an overnight landfall. So it's definitely not going to be fun to have an overnight landfall. Here's a look here at the actual 5 o'clock advisory cone with the wind. So obviously it's 50 miles an hour now, looking like possibly 65 tomorrow morning. 80 miles an hour on Friday afternoon, and then 85 once again there for landfall. So it's really watching out. And even Mexico City, obviously the capital, may get some tropical storm winds sustained. Looking at the actual now alerts here, still tropical storm warnings across Cancun and Merida, and then we do have hurricane warnings for Tucpan and Veracruz. Obviously, Veracruz is really the big threat there as well, so keeping a very close eye on that. Let's look at the intensity guidance though for Grace, and obviously a lot when I kind of have this back to a hurricane, looking at anywhere from 70 knots to possibly 75 knots, so basically around anywhere from 80 to 85 miles an hour. You kind of see a massive peak. I mean, huge increase here. So like I did say, rapid intensification cannot be ruled out the possibility. Let's now get a look here at what the GFS 18Z wants to show. Actually, it's basically this is a very really new run. So here's a look here what they have for Grace here, actually, or not, sorry, not Grace, Henri, 1,002 millibars. So they kind of want to have it weakening here at least for the next day or so. And then I believe they have their Grace at 997 millibars. Do not get within 18 hours or so, still kind of see Grace, Henri, sorry, still above 1,000 or above that 999 millibars. So it's kind of still within the quadruple digits. Why we see now at this point, Grace is gonna start getting to act together, starting to strengthen once again in the central Bay of Campeche there. Then actually getting down to 984 millibars within 24 hours. And then there you see by 24 hours, so that's when actually Henri starts to get his act together once again. 991 millibars, dropping 9 millibars within that time frame. And then we see a lamp ball of 976 millibars according to the GFS here. So GFS is still being very consistent within within a lamp ball within the 970s pressure wise. And there you see, it looks like now Henri once again having some more trouble within that strengthening. However, it does get its act together. At least I think it does there later on. 979 millibars within 54 hours, and then its peak at 975. And then having it make a lamp ball there for New England. Actually, let's actually see what they have for the actual lamp ball there. So that actually is a very similar thing to what they had with the H-Wharf. So obviously 976, really intimidating storm heading for Cape Cod. Then it weakens a whole 11 millibars. And then it makes lamp ball within probably like 990, which is obviously a lot less intimidating than 974, 976 here. Let's actually get a look at the actual 10-meter winds here. So you see pretty intimidating storm there. Looking at probably maybe 75 miles an hour here, maybe 80. And then dramatically weakens here to probably only a high end tropical storm. Let's see, maybe around 56 knots, maybe 60 knots. So we're looking at maybe a high end tropical storm. Then it just dramatically weakens as it goes inland. So that's a pretty big factor, though. Most likely will weaken just before a landfall back to a tropical storm. So look at the CMC. This is the 12Z as well. They kind of have they're way behind on both systems actually, but they still CMC wants to have like a 999 millibar landfall. But yeah, the CMC is really far behind. Let's see what the Icon wants to have. This is the 18Z Icon. They as well have a little bit trouble there with, or at least have Henri having a little bit trouble, as well they actually have now within 24 hours or so. That Grace gets act together, make landfall at a 980 millibar system, and then they actually have now I believe they have Henri getting pretty intense as well. 980, actually 979 millibar peak there, and making landfall for Rhode Island, but as a 990 minor tropical storm. So again, a lot of models have it getting pretty strong, heading its way towards the north. And look at that, they kind of all relate to having it as a category 1, obviously. Heading for New England, and obviously it weakens because it was really cold water, so obviously that's going to be a pretty big factor to why it's going to weaken so much. And let's look at the actual ridge itself here. So we are going to be seeing some pretty intense shear right now across the actual region. See that really big dip there. There's the high pressure up here, then a trough kind of down here. So we're going to be seeing a ton of shear acting as a blockade actually. And we're also seeing as well a little bit kind of more of a little jet right there as well. At least a little bit of a kind of, I guess, a small wave trough, I guess you could say that. But that's going to really affect this storm a lot, and keeping it going west a little bit. And then as this high pressure gets rather close, or at least a little bit closer, it's going to have a pretty big impact and kind of have it go due northward as well. We're going to be seeing kind of a little bit of blockade system, kind of keeping it from going further westward. So the only option really is going northward, and that's exactly what's going to happen. You see a really strong tut right there. Actually, it's a rather strong trough. I mean, that's a pretty intimidating trough right there. That's actually pretty interesting. But as well, overall, we're just going to keep a very close eye on the system, but we kind of have a better idea where it's going to go. Look at the H-Wharf here. This is 12Z H-Wharf. Like I did say, they kind of do similar with the GFS, so showing here kind of have it really weakening before a landfall. But they have within around 48 hours having Henri become a 959 millibar storm. We all know it's not going to happen, and they want to have it 955 peak, heading straight for New England. Look at the water, it's right there, 961, and it weakens so fast. Look at even 968 right there, but somehow it makes landfall only 900, and let's see here, 993 millibars. So even the H-Wharf is saying 955, yet having it make a landfall in the 990s. So it's just showing you how it's going to really weaken a lot. I mean, look at this. This is extremely intimidating. Look at that. 96 knots, which is basically around 110, 150 miles an hour, almost a major. And it just weakens like that. I mean, 984, 989, and basically at 990 millibar. I mean, that's even the H-Wharf is having less than the peak, or less than the actual landfall of the National Hurricane Center, which says a lot here. But hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.